As we get nearer and nearer to a Cleveland Browns training camp, we have brought in today from Browns Wire Corey Kinnan to discuss with us the offensive side of the ball. Is it ready to compete with the top offenses in the AFC, the defense, and of course, is it possible that the Cleveland Browns, 2 times within 4 years, will be headed to the playoffs? All that and more, your latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. Summer's here. Most places the weather's cooperating, but I hope, again, everybody getting into the summer swing. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. 7th season now doing Cleveland Browns coverage. I have the battle scores, like many of you do, to have been along on this joint here today. Running Browns Wire currently, and it's always had a nice relationship with anybody over at Browns Wire. And it always seems that if one friend steps out at Browns Wire, it seems another friend steps in. Corey Kinnan now running the show over there as we manipulate our way through June, kind of the quiet month. We'll get started a little earlier with regular season coverage this year with Hall of Fame and Joe Thomas. But where we're going to kick it off here today is the Browns offense. Now, the Browns offense, a lot of good signs here, and still maybe something to be added somewhere along the line, and we'll see the way that plays out over the weeks and months to come, either heading into training camp or during training camp. But Corey, the key here, and you look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously the reigning Super Bowl champions, a total offensive amount last year of 7,220 yards. I don't think anybody believes that the Cleveland Browns are certainly on that pace yet. But this is kind of, I don't want to say the benchmark, but this is kind of like the club you need to get into when you're talking about the Chiefs, when you're talking about the Bills, and just some of the top, most elite offenses in the entire NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you even look at the Jaguars, the Jaguars started to light it up through the air as well. So, I mean, yeah, you need to get explosive through the air. That's how you win in the NFL. And I think the Browns are moving in the right direction, in a good direction, based off of everything we saw from minicamp, all of the pistol, all of the jet motion, all of the, 11 personnel that we're going to get. Yeah, I'm excited because I do think we're going to see a pretty big shift. I think we saw it the first game where Deshaun came back against Houston. We saw a lot of RPO stuff. We saw a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of seam shots up the middle of the seam. And then it kind of seemed like they pulled back a little bit those last 5 weeks from that. I don't know why. Maybe it was, I think at that point, it's probably more Kevin saying, man, I'm not comfortable just flipping the offense on its head 11 games of the season. But, you have a full off season now to kind of get it rolling. So they didn't skimp at playmakers. I think I heard it somewhere. I don't remember where I heard it from, but I've kind of latched to it and I love it, is that good teams are really greedy at wide receiver, and the Browns got really greedy at wide receiver this offseason. They moved back 32 spots and effectively turned the 43rd overall pick into Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman. They went out and got Jordan Akins. So I think they're good and loaded. Marquise Goodwin now to kind of fill that vertical threat. And, and I think that what they did is they pieced together, like, if we can get 300 yards here, 600 yards here, 404 red zone touchdowns here. I think they just kind of pieced it together like that. And so I think the weapons are there now for them to attack through the air. I'm really excited to see where this offense goes.
One of the things that, I think everybody points out, and I looking at the offense, I don't think there's really a question to be had, obviously, until you get to the running back spot. Now, here was the team for the last couple of seasons, obviously was operating with Nick Chubb and had one insurance policy in Kareem Hunt, and not even one insurance policy because he had a second insurance policy in Dearness Johnson. 2021, obviously, that paid dividends from both players. 2022, we saw Kareem Hunt, for whatever the reason, just, the explosiveness, just was not there. Dearness Johnson, can't really say anything because we just didn't really see the guy in a meaningful rep whatsoever. Now, we all joke and, look, you can be on either side of the fence. You can either think Jerome Ford's the goods or you can think Jerome Ford's not the goods. Here's the case. None of us are right. After 8 NFL carries, none of us are right. As my buddy Pete Smith says, well, which one of the 8 carries in 2022 convinced you that Jerome Ford was ready to be a full-time back? So the question is, and I do think this is going to correlate a little bit, because I think the easiest way to involve Jerome Ford is just pure as a runner, which maybe now you start to use Nick more as a receiver, which you haven't in the past, but it could be a way maybe to limit some hits on Nick, still get the same amount of production here. But it does lead to a question there as far as where that room is at for 2023. Certainly there's a lot of names out there. It's a dead market to be a free agent running back right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Jerick McKinnon was the popular answer before he resigned with the Chiefs.
But how could you not go back? How, for what he did last year, how could you not go back?
Especially down the stretch in the playoffs, he was on a heater. So I'm not. I mean, if you could get Dalvin Cook, to come here for $1 million or 1 year, $6 million, yeah, I don't think he's going to sign for 1 year, $6 million. But we'll see what happens with the running back market. But talk about a scheme fit and a guy with a skill set to kind of pair with Nick Chubb. But the question is, like, one, Nick Chubb's not carrying the football 300 times next year. It's just not going to happen. That's a one-off. It's never going to happen again.
Well, not if you want to succeed in January.
Right, exactly. And two, one, for workload management, he's almost 30 now. And two, just the general direction the offense is going, it's not going to happen. And two, you have to look at Kareem Hunt touched the ball 155 times last year. So do you trust Jerome Ford to touch the ball 155 times? You could say maybe even more than that if Chubb's not touching the ball 300 times. I don't think it'll be more than that, just generally because I don't think they're going to run the ball as much. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot more than they did a year ago. But the running back market is dry. Again, Ezekiel Elliott, I've written on it, contributes nothing to this team. Like he's good in pass pro. Okay, that's cool. He's a horrid receiver. He's an incredibly inefficient runner. Like a third down pass pro like specialist it's not a role in the NFL. If you want to do that, throw James Hudson in the backfield in third down. Like I don't like if that's what you're hoping to get out of a guy. Like and so I really look at, I don't know. I heard they were looking at maybe Justin Jackson as like a cheap 1 year deal, guy who played for the Chargers and I think the Lions. I'm kind of drawn at, where the market's at right now to JD McKissick.
Yep.
Has had some really good success out of the backfield as a receiver with Washington and with Seattle. So I think that's the name that sticks out. If they do go out and add a back, it would be JD McKissick. But again, I think we're looking at it. It's Jerome Ford as running back too. I think that's what the reality we're looking at. And I think they have probably some pretty good explosiveness data based on kick return, top speed kick return data that they like, comparable to what Kareem Hunt was probably down in the mud in those same metrics a year ago. So, but it really is a shot in the dark. You're basing what you expect out of Jerome Ford based off of your college evaluation, why you drafted him in the 5th round to begin with, and to whatever play speed metrics that you saw on kickoff returns, where he had a really good season as a kickoff returner. But again, there's none of those 8 carries. So when I have to go back to then what did he do at Cincinnati? He was an okay receiver, but he's a pretty linear back. He's a one-cut back. He's going to stick his foot in the ground and he's going to get upfield. So, maybe as they're transitioning to gun run, where Nick Chubb is one of the most efficient runners out of gun. So that's good for them as it is. But as they're transitioning to a lot more gun run, maybe they're saying, hey, we just need him to hit a gap and get upfield. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. And again, in camp, mini camp, they were using Elijah Moore a lot out of the backfield as well, and jet sweep looks and stuff like that. So maybe Elijah Moore is that third guy they're looking at is like, well, if you want a guy who can catch the ball to the backfield, why not put a receiver back there?
Yeah, I think their hopes and expectations on what they can do with Elijah Moore are limitless. There's no question about that. And I think the other thing with a veteran running back is you're bringing this guy in here, and Browns wise, I think the absolute hope is that whoever you bring in, you see more out of Jerome Ford. So basically, it becomes just a move you made just to hopefully basically just cement the fact that Jerome Ford does what you think he's capable of, but you have the understanding of there's nothing proof wise to think he's going to take that step. You're basically going into it with a little bit of blind faith. We're going to switch it up here. The defense is for me where it really got interesting. You make a major home run hire, a defense coordinator. It comes with the understanding that, hey, we are going to get you what you need. And I think to this point, Andrew Berry has certainly done that and more. Jeff Lloyd, Corey Kinnan, your latest Locked on Browns. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. If you were like me and you're going to devote 2.5, 3 hours to your favorite team, best thing I suggest is same game parlay. Put up a small amount of money. If it turns out that the bet hits, your team wins most likely, and you found a way to get a pretty decent payday. So don't miss your chance to snag a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. We continue here on Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everydayers who join us now, strong on YouTube, over 6,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for that. Best thing I can suggest is to join the Everyday Club. And the best way to do that, of course, is to subscribe to Locked On Browns podcast here on YouTube. Notifications on, so when the content drops, you are all here to absorb it. Audio-wise, Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Corey, so we sat through, and I think that was probably for everybody was the biggest, probably just the aggravating part of 2022 was seeing the way this defense came of age towards the end of 2021. A lot of us, I'm sure, had, our reservations about handing Jadeveon Clowney $6 million more for year 2. And wow, we got a really nice return. And yes, that just absolutely blew up in everybody's face. Hoping that John Johnson III would find a way to evolve into a true free safety, which, sadly, the Browns have to take some responsibility in that, because when you pay a player to do something that they're not comfortable with, some of that is just as much as on you as it is on the player. But now the changes are made. You bring in a big time defensive coordinator. You make these moves, whether it was Tomlinson, whether it was Okoronkwo, whether it was Thornhill. Then you go through the draft and you continue to add an edge. You continue to add a defensive tackle. Then you get out of the draft. And I think everybody, and it was great because everybody talked for about 5 weeks about what they thought the expectations of Ogbenai Okoronkwo would be for this defense. And then, I don't know what? Hey, maybe we'll just make you a swing edge because we have the opportunity to bring in a player like Zadarius Smith. I think a guy who's going to come in and help with the leadership aspect. We know Miles, leads in his own way. He's not the true rah-rah guy. And look, that's fine. It's not everybody. And, and the other thing I always joke about is, Miles can't truly sit down and watch reps with other people and say, oh, well, this is what I did. And everybody says, well, Miles, I don't have a 43-inch vertical. I don't run a 4.5 40. So that's great. I love all the tips, big guy. But, you've got the entire toolbox. I'm over here with a flathead screwdriver and a half of a hammer. So now, but you look at this. But the crucial part of this, and now what I brought up 2021, what did we say? It was slow with the defense evolving. Then it really, really picked up. The Browns are not in that position here with the way the schedule fell this year. 3 division games within your first 5. You obviously also throw in the San Francisco 49ers. And, the thing that scares the death out of the 49ers is if your team has any weaknesses, a team that's going to expose them is the San Francisco 49ers. But I think we all feel better about the offense going in this year. But I think the concern maybe some of us have is the defense and how long will it gel, because they don't necessarily have the time right out the box for that to happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, the talent up front is there. I would say I'm still a little terrified of the defensive tackle room because I feel like they're a Dalvin Tomlinson injury away from being back in a very similar spot they were a year ago. Like you're a Dalvin Tomlinson. Yeah, you're a Dalvin Tomlinson injury away from starting Jordan Elliott and Siaki Ika probably up front and hoping, right now.
What do you mean? I've heard this is Jordan Elliott's offseason.
Well, listen, here's my thing with Jordan Elliott. That dude must be a really, really great person because every coach raves about the guy every single year. Every year, it's like this new coach is like, yeah, Jordan Elliott's great. And Jim Schwartz is already doing the same thing. Like, oh, yeah, Jordan Elliott's been great. It's like, okay, like he must be a really great, like a really hard worker, really great dude. But man, they need something out of him. And I love what they did with the back end of that room and bringing in Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill on like Maurice Hurst didn't have any guaranteed money, and Tristan Hill has like very minimal guaranteed money. So they're not roster locks, but what they brought those guys in to do is to basically throw. I mean, Jordan Elliott's a lock now that he restructured his contract more than likely, but they brought those guys in to throw him in a cage with Perrion Winfrey and say, hey, you guys duke it out for 1 or 2 roster spots. We'll see what happens here. But again, they're a Dalvin Tomlinson injury away from having a pretty poor rotation, bottom of the barrel rotation. So if they could go out, I would still love it if they went out and got a guy like Matt Ioannidis. You know, he's still on the market. He's been a guy we've talked about since February because he's been one of the top defensive tackles. I think he's just taking his time and waiting it out. Like, there's no reason that dude shouldn't have a deal. It's not that teams aren't interested. You know what I'm saying? So unless there's something in his medicals that's showing up, but and then the secondary, man, they have all the talent in the world, and they brought in Rodney McLeod. So, like, if you want a guy who knows Jim Schwartz better than anybody on the market, he knows his defense and who can literally be a coach on the field, like, that's the guy to go get, and they got him. They have a true post safety, you know, and I think they part of the allure to hiring Jim Schwartz is that they didn't have to overhaul their scheme significantly. You know, they're still going to run a lot of cover 1, a lot of cover 3. It's kind of what they did under Joe Woods, and so that's kind of what's comfortable for the defensive backs, you know, but you know, a more coachable language, easier to communicate brand of that with the coach who's just going to say, hey, go out and play and we'll learn about it later. Whatever you did wrong, we'll learn about it later. So instead of trying to overcoach them and give them so much terminology, secondary shouldn't have any issues. But again, now you look at the linebackers and they did absolutely nothing with the linebackers. And I think the thought there is, you know, some improved front 4 play will allow these guys to run a little bit freer at the second level than they did other than having guards in their face right off the ball like they did a year ago because defensive tackles couldn't anchor in a double team. But that's a big gamble, you know, especially when you had 4 of those guys who had season-ending injuries a year ago. So you're banking on those guys to come back. Sione Takitaki is probably not going to start for this. He's probably going to be on PUP for the first 6 weeks as well. So, I mean, you're probably starting Tony Fields at Sam. So that's a big gamble. You know, I hope it pays off that these guys, the improved front 4 can allow those guys to play a little bit freer and maybe just a different mentality from their defensive coordinator as well. Again, Joe Wood's one of those guys to sit 5 yards off the ball and catch. You know, I don't know if that's what Jim Schwartz is going to ask those guys to do. I hope he's asking them to penetrate gaps a little bit more than Joe Woods did. Anthony Walker played well for 3 weeks, but again, he got hurt the 3rd game of the season. So, there's some optimism there, but it's a big gamble to just run it back. And outside of bringing in a couple special teamers in that room.
I think also part of the thought process is that this team is going to be able to put up more points consistently, which, you know, obviously is hoping taking opposing teams out of, you know, the run game, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely everybody's, you know, nightmare. And it seems like such an obvious move because, you know, we've done it for the last couple of years. I mean, last year it was, hey, can we bank on any of these guys to hit? We all think Dalvin Tomlinson will hit, but, you know, when you're still sitting here with basically a scratch off and hoping any one of these guys turn out to be something. And look, Maurice Hurst certainly could be. And you hate to have to look at, you know, the background that's held a player like that back, but, you know, sometimes those things sort of tell the tale here. But just getting back to the secondary, I mean, you're going 3 deep at safety. I mean, right off the bat, you have a player like Hickman, who a lot of people think as a UDFA probably has an easy path to make this team. You go to the cornerback slot and, you know, all the conversations and who wants to play slot. A lot of teams would beg to have this problem of the fact that they have too many corners and how are they going to get them all enough reps. Then you throw in the fact that they always like a player like AJ Green. And so you get real quickly to your 9-10 number of what you have in that room. But you look at, you know, the 6 secondary players, if they wanted to put the 3 corners, 3 safeties on the field, you match that up against any team's 6 defensive backs they can put on the field. It's about as good as it can get.
Yeah, and it kind of worked. The depth kind of worked itself out at corner as well. Like there was the big thing when Newsome was like, "I'm not playing in the slot." Like he straight up has said, "I'm an outside corner," and then it left us like, okay, well, you got 3 outside corners then. So what do we do here? But you know, Jim Schwartz had a little heart to heart, and you know, the agent change probably inspired some of that heart to heart as well. Like people, I think that whole situation was funny back when he changed agents and the trade request that turned out not to be a trade request, and like news came out that blew up. But I mean, like Rosenhaus has been to Berea 1,000 times. There's a reason Rosenhaus was in Berea. They weren't just doing a meet and greet. You know what I'm saying? Like they had a meeting and said, hey, if this doesn't get resolved, like we're going to take other steps. Like that's what happened. And it kind of worked itself out. You know, Denzel Ward has said, you know, I'm going to be playing inside a lot. Greg Newsome has said like, oh, I don't mind playing inside. I just don't want to play inside all the time. You know, it feels like I'm playing linebacker. I don't want to do that. But with both of those guys and under Joe Woods, like they didn't match at all. Corners played left, played right, played nickel. That was it. Like whoever's lined up across from you, that's who you're going to guard. And under Jim Schwartz, it seems like they're going to match a lot, which is one really good for the personnel they have for Denzel Ward to say, oh, Tyreek Hill's playing in the slot. Let me go follow him in there. Like, oh,
you got
Mike Evans is lined up in the slot. Martin, go kick inside with, you know what I'm saying? Like that's just something they didn't do under Joe Woods. And because they're going to do that now, that's going to allow Martin Emerson to come back on the field a lot more. You know, they're still going to run a lot of nickel. Like they're going to run a lot of nickel, but the matching style of what they're going to do rather than just saying, hey, Greg, go play inside 100% of the time is going to allow Greg to play outside a lot more, where again, down the stretch against Pittsburgh, he was dominant that week. I think it was the last game of the season. He was dominant outside. His rookie season, he was dominant outside the numbers. Like after his rookie season, people were talking about him and Patrick Surtain Jr. in the same sentence about like, oh, these rookie corners were really good in 2021. So the hope is that you let Greg Newsome play where he's good, you know, play where he's comfortable. So at least a greater deal of snaps. So I'm glad that kind of worked itself out. And then, I mean, Rodney McLeod from Ronnie Harrison. I mean, Ronnie Harrison, oh my goodness. There's a reason that he's not on this roster anymore. And so even when you go into dime looks now, you've got a trustworthy third safety who's kicking on the field too. So, and just having him allows you to do some creative stuff in nickel. You want to kick Dilpit down in the box. Cool. That sounds great. You want to kick McLeod in the slot. That sounds great. You can do that. So, shouldn't be an issue in the secondary anymore. And again, with Jim Schwartz simplifying the language that they're using, you know, which Denzel Ward has raved about, like, oh, it's a lot easier to communicate back here. It's a lot easier to understand what we're doing. There should be no excuses for that unit.
I just go back to one thing and one thing only. It was the second Bengal game where, you know, obviously Boyd and Higgins left the game, and all of a sudden the famous words of it became
Jeff
more
Howard?
difficult to cover. Yes, it became more difficult to cover them. And honestly, everybody should have gone at that point, and you should have just let the players coach themselves because, number one, even if you believe that, you were ludicrous. You were even more ludicrous to actually put that out to, because everyone was just like, all right, seriously, are you kidding me right now? There is no way. It became more difficult. And again, you know, as far as putting players on players, look, you know, Denzel Ward, I've tried to talk about this for years. If the biggest threat is at slot, you take your number one corner and you go try to, you know, basically threaten the number one option if that's where he's playing, and, you know, just move the guys around. And obviously the other thing is it should whet players' appetite, you know, to do something different or to say, look, yeah, like you said, there's Tyreek Hill. You know what I'm saying? Yes, Greg, you know, no, you're Denzel Ward. We're paying you $100 million. That's your dude. Go make it happen. And of course, I think Jim Schwartz looks at this defense and says, I have some bona fide studs here. So last thing I'm going to do is cloud their judgment, cloud their instincts, and take away their aggressiveness by having them overthinking. It's a foolish way to do it. Yeah, after the first 7, 8, 9 weeks when there's plenty of tape on you, but then you can get cute. You can get creative. You can switch things up. But it's the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid to start it out the box. Third segment, we're going to come up here. Jeff Lloyd, joined by Corey Kinnan. We're going to talk about how this 2023 season might play out here for the Cleveland Browns. Stick around. Appreciate everybody. Your latest Locked On Browns. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, joined by Browns Wire Corey Kinnan. Appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. The Everydayers, appreciate you all. Pushed over 6,000 subscribers here on YouTube over the weekend. Everybody join in the club. Subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on. Audio-wise, Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm drinking the juice here, Corey. The more it goes on here, I've put myself on record. I think there is a legit shot that Elijah Moore will lead this team in receptions this year. I've had a tay-to-tay with some Bengals fans over the last couple of weeks trying to tell them I don't know where the improvement for their roster was. And I've heard lovely things like they don't have to improve their roster, even though they went one step less in the 2022 season as opposed to the 2021 season. But the aspirations for this team, and look, I think a lot of it comes down to where you feel Deshaun will return to his former self, where the defense will be early and how high of a unit can they become? Can they become a dominant unit, which looks like there are parts of it that can be that case. Thoughts here, 2023. Obviously, it starts difficult. And if the Browns look at 3-2, God forbid even they find a way to go 4-1 through that first 5-game stretch, there's the ability to run away and hide. But this team, if it goes rough in the first few weeks, it's going to be really, really difficult to make up that ground because the division games are sparsed out as the season closes out here, and you never want to put yourself in a position where basically you want to go into week 18, basically begging for we have to win to get in.
Yeah, if you go 0-3 against those division rivals to start the season, that's gonna the chants are gonna be loud from the fan base.
Fairly and rightfully so.
Right. I mean, you should at least be able to beat Kenny Pickett out of those first 3 games. Again, I think the Ravens are going to be really good, man. I'm under the belief that what's the guy's name? Greg Roman held that offense back, man. I think people believe
he couldn't do anything more
Greg
with
Roman,
it.
Yeah, Greg Roman catered the offense to Lamar Jackson, but I'm under the impression that like Lamar, there's still a ceiling that Lamar hasn't hit because Greg Roman kind of capped it a little bit. So now with Todd Monken,
he's going into year 6. They still have no idea what kind of wide receiver works with him.
Right. But we're talking about an offensive coordinator who made Stetson Bennett look like a Heisman candidate, like who got him drafted. There's no reason that guy should have gotten drafted. A 28-year-old who hasn't graduated college yet. I mean, he's 24, 25, but like hasn't graduated college yet. Like there's no reason that guy shouldn't have gotten drafted. With the tools that he has, like, he's a good athlete, but like, okay. So I think the Ravens are going to be good. You got to look at the wide receiver room, and I still think there's a chance they could, like, they're a sleeper team for me to go out and land DeAndre Hopkins still. I really think they are. So I think they're a threat to really make a deep run this year. But again, there's no reason the Browns also shouldn't. Again, we know who Deshaun Watson is based off of a large body of work and a 6-game sample size of really poor play. I think even some regression to the mean is expected. And what is regression to the mean for Deshaun Watson? I still think that's like a top 12 quarterback, like like minimum, like that's the mean for him. So even if you get top 12 quarterback play, sure, is he living up to the $230 million contract? Probably not. But if you have a top 12 quarterback in the league, that buys you a lottery ticket, I think, still to make a run. You know what I'm saying? So, and again, the skill positions are completely overhauled. Like the wide receiver room was too deep last year. Too deep. That's all you had. So, and when Njoku, was on pace for 1,000 yards there for a little bit before he suffered a couple injuries that set him back. But so I think this team's due for some regression to the mean. Offensively, again, the defense is a wild card, but if you can score 28, 32 a game, like you're probably sitting pretty for the most part. Get through those first 5 games and you have like a 7 or 8 game stretch where you're looking at rookie quarterbacks and pretty poorly constructed rosters that you got to take on after that. Like, I mean, Tennessee's going to be bad this year. There's some really bad teams down that stretch. So, I think the playoffs have to be the expectation because I wrote on this a little bit as well that I don't think Kevin Stefanski is going to coach out his 5th year of his contract. He's either going to get an extension or they're going to say, we got to do something else after this year. So if they go 9-8 and miss the playoffs, I think they're going to look for a different head coach even. So I just don't see I don't think there's a pathway where Kevin Stefanski coaches out that 5th year. So make the playoffs. Cool. Here's a new contract extension. We have your coordinators. Bill Callahan opted to re-sign a new contract rather than interview for an offensive coordinator position. You did it. We have some consistency. We have some no turnover. That's great. But if you don't make the playoffs for 3 straight years, man, that's hard to say. Yeah, we'll run it back for a 5th year. Even at 9-8, like that, I don't think that happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the other thing is you look at it and it doesn't matter. You could, it doesn't matter the coach's name. It doesn't matter the franchise's name. We went to the playoffs 4 years ago. We haven't been in the playoffs since. I mean, insert whatever name it is. And obviously that is putting you in a severe spot as far as, longevity with the position. And the other thing is 9-8 and, and as we play now, with the way, the 17 game schedule is 9-8, it's certainly not going to be good enough. I mean, I'm not even sure, Corey, there could be a team that wins 10 games in the AFC and still might end up on the outside looking in. Granted, there's going to be a lot of attrition with the West. There's going to be a lot of attrition within the North and, the East, obviously with Aaron Rodgers there. And then a couple of the games that the Browns got, like, Jacksonville coming to Cleveland was huge for them. The Jets, and we'll see what's left of Aaron Rodgers by week 17, and then you're asking him to come in on a short week to play a Thursday night game in Cleveland, and hopefully that'll be one day where the weather, obviously, can be a factor for the Browns here. But overall, outside of maybe bagging that last defensive tackle, maybe finding that insurance, insurance policy at the running back, and hopefully, Jerome Ford can just outplay said insurance policy. They've done what they can do, and they've put together, a roster that should change everything. And, for me, it comes down to the $232 million investment.
Yep. That's again, you could have the defense. You could have two guys double-digit sacks with Okronko pushing 8 sacks, 9 sacks, and nothing matters if the quarterback play is what it was the last 6 weeks. So that's really all there is to it. This league is dictated by how good your quarterback is, and I would say maybe not completely. Like, I think Justin Herbert is held back, and I think he's a really good quarterback. Sure. And I think Jalen Hurts is probably not as good as he's being schemed to be. There's some things like that, but for the most part, it's gonna come down to how good is your quarterback. And now, we've heard that the Browns, and we've seen the Browns doing some really cool stuff on offense in minicamp. We've heard that Kevin Stefanski's turning over some of the protection calls and some of the pre-snap responsibilities over to his quarterback. He's your $230 million quarterback. He should be able to do some of that pre-snap stuff, have control of that stuff. So compared to, a guy like Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett. But I think an underrated part of the offense that has to be talked about, though, is how the offensive line adjusts to Mayfield / Brissett, who weren't going to scramble. They weren't going to extend plays. You kind of had to run the loop from the tackle's perspective, give him a pocket to step up to, versus Watson's gonna go outside the pocket. Watson's gonna get along the boundary, and that's a tough thing for offensive tackles to adjust to. A tough thing for offensive linemen to adjust to. That it's not going to be a 5 seconds and the ball's out, kind of thing. 4 seconds, ball's out. It's going to be 4 seconds, and your quarterback could be outside your left hip if you're the left tackle, or outside your right hip if you're the right tackle, and you got to kind of prepare for that. So I think with the full offseason, and I think that's why we saw some regression down the stretch as well, is because the offensive lineman went from playing with pure pocket passes for 3 years to a guy who, he's out there now, I'm over here, so full off season to kind of work through some of that stuff as well, and play with a guy who has genuine ability to extend plays and make magic outside of the pocket is an underrated thing that needs to happen, but we'll see.
Well, and the other thing is just, the quickness in Deshaun Watson getting to his drop, and, just things that they weren't comfortable with. Jacoby Brissett played well, but, as far as the word athlete, it's not going to be applied to Jacoby Brissett the way it's going to be applied to a guy like Deshaun Watson. And no, we have not seen anybody, athletically even close. And, the one you go back to and you get the idea, because the Browns burned by it so many times, was the run to clinch the victory against the Baltimore Ravens. Nothing was there. There was wide open space between the hashes. I'm going to take off. I'm going to get my 13, slide down, hand raised, Victor. It's over. Now we just pound it out, close it out. But either way, anyway, it's there. And look, we're all going to go into week 1 with all the excitement in the world. And by the beginning of October, it's going to be excitement off the charts, or it's going to be, is this coach going to make the entire season? Here we go again. We've seen this before. There's just so many ways to go with this franchise, which makes it so absolutely appealing. He is Corey Kinnan. Make sure, and I love the change in the @ obviously, thanks Elon. It is now @fake Corey Kinnan. So make sure you follow over there. Corey's doing a fantastic job with Browns Wire. As we said, we've always had a great relationship with Browns Wire over the years. A lot of friends going in and out of there. Corey, the latest one to run on the show. He is doing a fantastic job. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd, @Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Appreciate everybody, again, who makes Locked On Browns their first listen. Join the everyday crowd by subscribing to the YouTube channel. Notifications on. Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go, Browns.